I am officially joining you fresh-faced and ready to get ready for the day. I'm excited to share with you the mindfulness, healing work, and physical well-being that I tried to generate in order to get pregnant on our first try. Every layer of this was a really conscious choice. I try to approach a lot of my life with intention setting and future vision and aligning all of the pieces. So this is something I'm really passionate about because it was literally like 2.5 years in the making for me to become pregnant. So I'm excited to share that journey with you while I put my face on. Let's do it. Also, I'm not going to tell you what I'm doing because I don't know what I'm doing. I am not a makeup artist. I like to play with makeup, and that's about the extent of it. Can we talk about the hair first? I dyed it purple, in case you didn't notice. That was a lifelong dream of finally doing something I said I was going to do about 10 years ago. I told my then boyfriend, now husband, that I wanted mermaid hair forever ago. I finally did it for myself. I think this is connected to becoming a mom. Somehow, I don't really know how yet, but embracing who I really am and what I really want is definitely a theme. Also, I'm gonna try to use the viewfinder thing for makeup, but I have a mirror right in front of me, so if you see my eyes kind of darting every which way, that's what's going on. This is not really my color anymore, but we're going with it. Any other neutral skin tone peeps out there will get me, because my skin can be pink or it can be tan. It can be yellow hued or pink hued, depending on the season and depending on the day. It works. Anyway, we're not talking about makeup here. So it all started. No, for real. So my husband and I got married in 2019, a few months before the pandemic happened. Pretty soon after we got married, we started, having the discussions about what's the timeline? What's the plan? When do we want to have kids? What do we need to have in place before we feel ready? And, just talking about the future. I very quickly realized that I didn't feel anywhere close to ready for creating a human and raising them and bringing them into this world. Number one, it felt like there were still things that I saw going on inside of my marriage that reminded me of my parents and my family of origin that I didn't want to carry forward. There were patterns in the way that we communicated, especially the way we argued, that really needed some work before we could if this was ideal circumstances for having a really, we were just us. If this was us without kids, we needed to build some more tools in our tool belt before becoming parents because there was just work to do. And so my personal work, we both needed to kind of work on different things. So I'm just going to talk about my side of things because that's my story to tell. The work that I started to do in 2020 was on, forgive me if I'm very slow to explain things in this video, but if you're a real one, you're not gonna care. So the thing that I realized soon after talking about this with my therapist, I have a therapist and I have a life coach. When I spoke to both of these parties, my therapist was pretty clear that there were some what we call mother wounds and inner child work that were presenting themselves in my life at the time, and I would need to do some pretty extensive work on healing, going into the past and working through some stuff from that happened between the age of 8 and 18, just for people who are kind of interested in this work. Some of the stuff, the methodologies that I used, I was working with a psychologist and she had us work on internal family systems, parts work. We did a lot of EMDR, especially when trauma responses were starting to come up, panic attacks. There were a lot of kind of heightened things that were coming up because of digging up all this stuff. And ultimately the journey of all these different tools and methodologies was about helping me address some ancestral rage that was a part of how every woman in my family has dealt with big feelings rage and long fuse and then gigantic bomb-like explosion of anger was kind of normal in my family. So working on untangling that and moving into acceptance and forgiveness of my lineage, of myself, of my husband, everything was kind of what all of these methodologies were for. The rage for me, when I would get in arguments with my husband, if my boundaries were crossed or if I felt unheard or I felt unloved or I just deeply didn't agree with him, rage would start to just like physically take over my body and my emotional like state. I would go into a heightened trauma response, and it was really unhealthy for me and my nervous system and for my relationship. It was an old pattern that I had no idea where to begin to change. So from 2020 to 2022, that was like a lot of therapeutic work. I met with a therapist once a week, and like all of this, just for context, was about becoming a mother. Like for me, I knew I wanted to become a mom. This is always something that like, I wasn't a kind of little girl that dreamed of her wedding day. I should probably like rub this in before it dries. I wasn't the little girl that dreamed of her wedding day. I was the little girl who dreamed of like having my baby. Like I was very much maternal from a young age, and throughout the years have had a nickname of like Mama Ellen. Like I just kind of have this mama bear energy to me. So I knew I wanted to be a mom, but I knew I wasn't ready to be a mom until I knew I could trust myself, which was really like at the core of it. Like I didn't feel like I could trust myself to handle big fucking feelings that come up when you're a human. A lot of that work was really difficult, to be honest. There was a lot of tears and anger to work through. I had to, at some point, this is gonna get really deep and vulnerable, so welcome to my channel. That's what we're here for. And in order for me to heal, this goes back to the fact that number one, I come from divorced parents, and it was pretty messy and terrible and traumatic. So there was a time during my healing work, for like many months actually, that in order for me to confront my greatest fear, one of my greatest fears is to get divorced, like to uproot my family and children from their lives and traumatize everyone in the process, break vows, and just like it is the antithesis of what I want. And having gone through it in a pretty traumatizing way as a child, like for me to recreate that would be realizing my greatest fear. So to me, marriage was a no-brainer to my husband. I was just like, I'm 100% yes, I'm in, let's do it, fuck yeah. But when I started doing this therapy work and this kind of internal stuff, it was also coinciding with the pandemic and shit exploding in the world. We started really disagreeing about a lot of the political landscape that came with COVID. And so we started arguing a lot about politics. So that's relevant because number one, I had never really definitively communicated clear boundaries to Matt almost ever in our relationship. Like boundaries in my family used to equal like conditional love, like setting a, if you do this, then I won't love you kind of a context. Even if it was like for a healthy reason, or if it's just like meeting a need, like it was not well accepted to assert boundaries. And because of the divorce, I also was scared that if Matt and I disagreed too much, then it could lead to divorce, you know, a natural kind of young framework of thought that's like, oh, if this is the beginning of the end, like if we're arguing a lot, that means we could be leading to divorce. So I say all of that because there was a while there during my therapeutic work, like between 2020 and 2022, that I basically had to be willing to entertain divorce, like actually consider it as an option. Not because it's what I wanted, but because this is actually something that comes up in coaching work all the time with my clients and in my own coaching with my coach. That if you do everything you can to avoid your fear coming true, you tend to attract that thing to happen. So I was so scared of divorce happening that I was contributing to patterns in my relationship that could very well have like ended up in divorce. So to me, some of the most powerful work I do and I have done for myself is like entertain worst case scenarios in a contained, healthy setting. Cause like my mind does that anyway. It'll like go down what if loopholes and rabbit holes forever and ever. But with a coach or with a therapist, there's a safer space to explore it and it's not as scary. So there was a while there that I had to entertain the possibility that maybe the stuff in our relationship or the stuff in me that came up with Matt meant we weren't compatible for being parents together. Like we loved each other dearly, but like I had to entertain that possibility in order to face it because it was such a great haunting fear of mine that like if I didn't actually address it head on, like it probably would have happened at some point or another anyway. That was terrifying. And I had to like share with my husband that like I had all these intrusive thoughts about divorce, that I was really starting to have to consider it as an option. Not that I wanted it, but like that I knew I wasn't trapped here, that I knew I was choosing this marriage and I was choosing this relationship, and I needed to know that I was going to be safe and okay no matter what happened in my life, whether we made it or didn't make it or whatever. So that to me was a really big healing work, and I have a history of codependency and stuff. This was a really big part of my healing, to like build the inner safety in myself that like whatever happens to me or in my life, I'm still safe and I'm still loved and I'm still okay. That was like a really big part of all of this. So what that ended up like helping us do was to rebuild our like way we communicate from like kind of the ground up, about especially in a conflict, like also in real life, but or not real life, but like also not in conflict, but it definitely was focused on, number one, identifying the triggers that created my rage, which were usually an unexpressed boundary. Like I hadn't expressed myself that like this way of speaking to me or this topic or this environment or whatever is not okay for me. It is not safe for me. I had not expressed those things to Matt or even been aware of them. So like really starting to understand what I required for safety, and also understand that safety is a self-generated experience. Unless I'm being physically harmed, I am responsible for my safety, my emotional safety. And so I have to protect it with boundaries, and I also have to trust that I am safe and okay no matter what happens, no matter what he says or does or whatever, like I'm ultimately safe. And I again caveat that we're not talking about domestic violence or any circumstance like that, but in a fairly healthy relationship, that to me is accurate. As you can tell, motherhood means a lot to me, and so delving into that work was really, really instrumental in me even being ready to entertain becoming a mother. So that is my mindfulness and healing work that went into becoming ready to be a mom. There are a couple other layers that I want to share, especially given like my listeners, you all, as a business owner and creative. How did I prepare myself? How did I prepare my business? How did I change my mindset towards kind of like the way my life is built right now to make space for motherhood and, you know, me changing a lot and my family evolving and my marriage changing, like all that kind of stuff. So for my business, and this applies to really any woman or anyone who wants to become pregnant, I feel like there were a few kind of core areas that I focused on with my coach. So therapy tends to be all about healing, and you go into the past and kind of break patterns that are still in place from the past into now. Coaching also breaks patterns, but a lot of it is in service of like where you are now to where you're going and where like the future vision is and how to like become the person. It isn't about like looking into the past anymore. It's about like who are you becoming in the process of creating this dream life. So for me, the first thing that came to my mind when I was asking myself this question of like, what did I change and focus on like in hindsight and also kind of in real time, was time, like my relationship with my time. Because as a business owner, and especially a newer business owner, I feel like I've been working on my eyebrows for 100 years and they're fine. Okay. Again, cannot multitask for the life of me. So for time, as a business owner, I felt like I was, and as a solo entrepreneur, especially like someone who's kind of like the CEO and the deliverer of my services, something that occurred to me in 2020 was that not only did I have a really big dream for my business that I wanted to build to come to fruition like sooner rather than later, like I wanted to be head on the path to my big dreams before becoming a mom. So like I had these like professional aspirations and goals in my business and in my life before becoming a mom. That was a part of it, but also time was becoming ever more valuable when I started thinking about like becoming a mom and running a business and like, you know, contributing to the operations of a household and all that kind of stuff. I realized how much time I gave away to things that didn't really have much value to my business or to me or to people. So I started to realize that number one, I needed to diversify my offerings and like to delegate a fuck ton more, not only internally, like to an assistant or delegating like operations of my business outside of me, but also I needed to shift up my offerings in order to have kind of a more scalable array of like things that I could help people with. All right, I need to make a decision about what I'm doing with my eyes. So hold that thought. I'm using an Anastasia. Look at me looking like a beauty guru. No. Oh, there you go. What was I saying? time became a really valuable resource to me, and I started hiring people in my business, growing a new offering, and like developing program design and curriculum and format and all that, and going into my first ever like high ticket launch, all during like this therapeutic work, which was a lot. I will not sugarcoat it. Like, it was a lot to lead a launch while also working on like trauma response level deep dive therapy, but I survived, and you will too if that's where you are. That was a really big part of kind of shifts. Again, like, I'm like years out from becoming a mom, but like this was something I was thinking about because I knew I wanted to become a mom at some point. So time became valuable. Creativity became like guiding light. Like, if I was sparked by something, I listened to that in me. And so for me, like, that began with the Powerhouse program and like evolving that offering over the course of the last few years to really like fulfill the vision I had for it. I'm doing like way more like bronzer and like contouring than I like ever do, but we're going glam today, I guess. Creativity was a really big priority for me because I needed to have outlets to express myself and to just follow kind of the intuitive voice in me and all that. And what the result of that was figuring out ways that I can diversify my income in a way that created passive income and felt like not work. So diversifying income was another piece of it, that like making this Airbnb, plus like the group coaching offering in my practice, plus figuring out, I think, like the path that I see excitement and success and possibly another income stream is music on YouTube, like recording some stuff and like making my own album, starting original like singer-songwriting stuff. And to me, like, all of these could evolve into new income streams and stuff. That was a really important part of, to me, feeling ready to be a mom, so that not everything was dependent on me coaching one client at a time. That was my only income stream as of 2020. And then stress management. Radical self-care has now become a part of my brand, kind of by accident. Like, it's just kind of part of how I have been able to start a second business, to deal with this therapy stuff, have a 6-figure launch of a brand new program, figure out marriage and life and shit. I think that self-care was one of my biggest breakthroughs, and like self-care not just from a practical lens, but from self-love. Like, really coming to understand how many things I was doing to myself or for myself that was attached to like a should, like I should be doing this for me or whatever, and then wondering why I never kept it up or like wasn't, you know, sticking to it. And also weight loss, like the kind of health world of things. So much of that was motivated by not loving myself. Oh, these are not even at all. Figuring out what I actually need is like the goal of self-care. Like, getting your needs met is what self-care is for. That was the process that I went through in business to figure out like how to manage stress with all these different things going on. Let me do eyeliner check. All right, this one's a little bit lower. Okay. Good enough. And so that's business. I mean, there's a lot in each of these categories that honestly could go on for hours and hours and hours, but that's pretty much it for business. If you like this Get Ready With Me format, or if you like just kind of chit chat style, please let me know in the comments. Like, it's going to be really important for me to kind of get your feedback along the way as I'm like experimenting all the time here. So if you like this, give it a like and or comment. That would be super helpful for me to just know what you like. I watch these videos all the time though, so like I figured I'd give it a shot. And then health. I actually wrote a blog with a lot of this information in it, so that if you are kind of a more visual person and need a list, I'll link the blog that I wrote about this earlier this year in the description box, so you can feel free to check that out and kind of get resources that I name here. But I mean, the 5-ish main areas of like stuff that I paid attention to in my health to make myself primed and ready for pregnancy was diet. I mean, I didn't diet for any extent and purpose, like it was not a diet, but I really, again, from this lens of like self-love and, you know, honoring my body and trying to give myself as great a chance as I possibly could to make a baby. From a diet perspective, I cut out alcohol for several months before trying to get pregnant. I have never really loved how I felt after alcohol anyway, so this was kind of like the straw that broke the camel's back of like, all right, I'm just done. I'm done drinking alcohol. Cut it out entirely. And I also ended up cutting out weed 1 month prior to conceiving. Weed is kind of my go-to like recreational thing, as well as like helps with my anxiety. But my doctor and some research told me that like to give my body the best chance at conception, it would be good to stop weed use about a month out. So that's what I did. Then, like, in terms of diet, like, I tried to just like cut out unhealthy oils, like seed oils and those canola oils and vegetable oils, like all those things that are just like really, really highly inflammatory for the body. I tried to like eat snacks and things that didn't have those oils in it and or whole foods and stuff. And then I tried, you know, really being conscious about healthy proteins and like kind of leaning more towards seafoods and like lean meats and stuff. I also, sleep was a really big part. Oh, am I gonna get mascara all over my lid if I do it that way? Any other hooded lids out there? I get mascara all over my lid if I don't look down. So I really got into normalizing my sleep schedule and like kind of keeping the same sleep rhythms pretty much every day, even weeks to weekends, and focusing on like my circadian rhythm, like really aligning when my body wanted to sleep, when the sun, like the position of the sun and like, you know, the effects that had on me. A lot of times like I would get tired at a certain time of night, but then I would just like turn on all these lights and look at my phone and like kind of wake myself back up again and then not be able to go to sleep very well. So I started, you know, being conscious of blue light and phone stuff. I started watching. This was actually a Matt thing. Part of what can help you get into a circadian rhythm is actually like putting yourself in front of the sun at sunrise or like in the morning and when the sun is setting. There's some really deep biological cues that come from not like looking directly at the sun, but like looking in the direction of the sun when morning sun is shining. It's really good for mental health and it's good for circadian rhythm to just kind of wake your body up naturally. And also at night to like watch the sunset or watch those colors, you know, kind of take over the sky. There's a cue that like happens in your body. That became a new rhythm for us. Like we were really connected to the sun and we got more sunlight than we had been. Even in the afternoons, like I would go outside on breaks, like just get a little sunlight. I look at the screen all day, so it's a lot of blue light stuff. Just allowing my body to connect to the sun in that way and the rhythms of life. And then supplements. Oh goodness, this is a little darker. I recommend the prenatal that I take that actually a coach friend of mine recommended to me. That's called FullWell Prenatal. I can put that in the description as well. It's very naturally derived. It's whole food based. It also has folate instead of folic acid. Folic acid is kind of the derivative of folate. It's like a synthetic derivative of it rather than like the natural things. FullWell Prenatal is great. I also took B complex, vitamin D, and then CoQ10, which I had never heard of until I read this book. It starts with the egg. Anyone trying to get pregnant or in the conception process, I highly recommend picking up It Starts with the Egg. I don't remember the author right now, but I can also make sure I link that below. It's also listed in the blog, that entry below. But that really helped me lifestyle shift wise. There were a few things that I just had never thought of, that like plastics in our world, like microplastics in all of our food and life, have greatly contributed to the increase in miscarriage in our society and world. Trying to think about things like, you know, limiting plastic use in ways that I can, you know, like we can't avoid it in everyday life, but there are some things that you can avoid. Just stuff like that, like the supplement stuff, the sleep stuff, stress management, all that kind of stuff was addressed in that book. It felt like a really great place to start to understand what pregnancy is going to be, what's going to take, and what my woman body needs and all the things. And then as far as like stopping birth control and stuff, and I just felt this like calling to stop my birth control about 18 months before I ended up getting pregnant, just because I wanted to. Number one, I had been on birth control for like 12 years straight. I realized the hormonal birth controls for me was just not something I aligned with anymore or believed in anymore or wanted for myself. Like I wanted to be able to connect to my actual cycle and my body and my hormones and like just like get in a more honest relationship with my body, to be honest. Honest relationship with my body, to be honest. I got off birth control about 18 months and it took me honestly like a year before my period was like, I didn't even know if I was ovulating or if it was happening in weird times. So I worked a lot actually with women's health coach and all that kind of stuff to really understand my body better, to help with the hormone fluctuations that come after getting off birth control, and just to like know how to track my cycle and know when I was ovulating, know when different phases of my cycle were happening and like what to expect during those different phases. So that was a really important part for me to also kind of connect to my womanhood and my natural cycles and my natural rhythms and all that kind of stuff, to know exactly the day that I'm ovulating so that when we tried, I would like literally without a shadow of a doubt know that this was, you know, this was gonna give us a shot. So that, I swallowed some. That is basically it. And this is like the world's longest video, but I hope that me just talking through some of this, whether you're trying to get pregnant or not, is helpful and or informative and or gives you food for thought in the future. Like if you're also kind of in the camp of like maybe gonna try to get pregnant in the next several years, like this is kind of where I started and what I thought about in that process. Even if you're not trying to get pregnant, like some of the stuff that I'm saying to me at this stage in my life, like whether I was having a child or not, I probably would still have to be doing the therapy work that I did and like taking care of my body in a better, more healthy way and reshaping my business to grow without my time. Like all of these things are things that I think I believe in, whether it was about pregnancy or not. So there you have it. I hope that supported you. And if you have any personal shares or questions that you have for me, please throw them in the comments. I would absolutely love to hear from you. And please stay tuned for my next video, which is all about first trimester symptoms and experience of like changes in my body and my life happening in real time. It was quite a ride, folks. So I will see you in the next video. Thank you so much for watching and much love to you. Bye.